FIFA's president is planning to enact his most diabolical scheme yet. Meanwhile, Italy's FA scrambles to another rebuild. Zidane officially kicks off his France tenure. And what's next for outcast Rashford? This is DMAC Daily. You know, at this point, labeling Gianni Infantino as a parasite is almost an insult to parasites. I mean, if you love football, then this guy should be your worst nightmare because he is actively working to destroy the sport in its entirety for the sole purpose of enriching his pockets. And if you dare criticize him for doing so, by the way, you're not operating in good faith, apparently. You're just spreading hate. So without further ado, let's spread some hate today, I guess, deep diving into Infantino's most egregious scheme yet. Now, over the past decade, we've watched Infantino's FIFA relentlessly push football towards greater commercialization with an expanded Club World Cup and an expanded World Cup, so more matches, more sponsorship inventory, carving the broadcast into quarters, implementing hydration breaks purely for player welfare, Super Bowl style entertainment, bigger television deals, bigger commercial partnerships. You get the gist, right? Infantino's reign has never been about the football. With every money grab, more power has been secured. It's hilarious to me when people say politics and football don't go hand in hand, because remember when Infantino first cozied up to Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman? Not long after the 2030 World Cup was announced, spanning across 6 countries and 3 continental federations, just so Saudi Arabia could get that 2034 World Cup unopposed. Job completed, I guess. On to the next objective for Infantino, intertwining himself with the world's current superpower, the United States, more specifically, the Trump administration. Now, in the past 12 months, Infantino and Trump have been working unusually close with one another. How could we forget about the FIFA Peace Prize? For what reason did FIFA feel the need to recognize the US head of state in that capacity? Well, Infantino does have a track record of being a puppet in order to please the most powerful, which is why the 2026 World Cup was so brazenly corrupt. Any semblance of preserving the sanctity of the beautiful game was thrown out the window with exorbitant ticket prices, the most unaffordable World Cup in the history of the sport, pricing out millions of everyday football fans around the world who weren't rich enough to attend. But Infantino didn't care about all of that criticism. It's why he didn't even think twice reversing a red card for the USA's star striker Balogun after a phone call from Daddy Trump. That was the most blatant case of political interference in modern World Cup history. But so what? At the end of the day, money talks. As much as we all criticize the overt corruption and greed on display at this year's World Cup, from a revenue generating capacity, it was the best World Cup ever. Which brings me to Infantino's next big proposal: to fundamentally transform the ownership structure of football's biggest tournament forever. Infantino wants FIFA to create an entirely new commercial company called FIFA Forward Enterprise. Into that company would go virtually every money-making aspect of the World Cup and FIFA's other major competitions. Every commercial asset that generates billions of dollars would be carved out of FIFA and placed into this new corporate vehicle. And then comes the part that has sent shockwaves through world football. FIFA would sell up to 20% of that company to private investors. Yes, technically the not-for-profit company FIFA selling the World Cup to private equity. And guess who's expected to be leading the investment into football's biggest tournament? A prominent investment company called Thrive Capital, founded by billionaire investor Joshua Kushner. Yes, the brother of Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law. The deal is also reportedly being structured with the assistance of JP Morgan, one of the world's largest investment banks and the primary financial backer of the ill-fated Super League attempt. So after months of watching Infantino cultivate the closest political relationship any FIFA president has ever had with a sitting US administration, or any state for that matter, the first major investment group expected to buy a stake in the commercial future of the World Cup just so happens to be led by a firm founded by the president's son-in-law's brother. That is honestly such an extraordinary coincidence. And if that wasn't enough, according to reporting by The Times, Infantino's long-term plan doesn't end by eventually leaving FIFA. Sources involved with the negotiations claim he is expected to become the chairman or commissioner of this new commercial enterprise after his presidency ends. An incredibly lucrative post-presidency life, it seems. A position that would see him earn a fortune. Apparently a salary akin to that of NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. The last time his salary was publicly disclosed in 2021, it was $64 million annually. Now, Infantino insists this entire move is all about democratizing football. His pitch is that all 211 FIFA member associations would ultimately benefit from the extra investment and the increased revenues generated by this new company. Sounds wonderful, right? Yeah, the problem here is that it requires you to take Gianni Infantino at his word, something that I implore you don't do because he is a compulsive liar. He is someone that is willing to do anything to personally enrich himself or his ultra-wealthy buddies at the expense of the beautiful game. Like, if you think the 2026 World Cup was cooked from a commercial standpoint, imagine the future broadcast if this were to go ahead. It is going to be akin to an NFL game on steroids, an advertiser's wet dream, a football fan's worst nightmare. What's even wilder to me is how Infantino is able to pull these strings behind the scenes, because this wasn't a proposal that emerged after months of open consultation within football's leadership. Members of FIFA's own council were reportedly blindsided, learning about the plan through media reports rather than through FIFA itself. The current chair of England's FA, Debbie Hewitt, actually sits on the FIFA Council as a vice president, and even she was reportedly completely unaware of the proposal. It wasn't even mentioned during the FA's board meeting just days earlier. Think about that for a second, right? We're not talking about fans like you and I being left in the dark here. We're talking about the very people responsible for governing world football. If members of FIFA's own executive leadership are finding out about one of the biggest structural changes in football history by opening a newspaper, what does that say about transparency inside the organization? Look, I know FIFA have always been uniquely corrupted. Sepp Blatter's leadership was hilariously fraudulent, but Infantino has gone power mad. Thankfully, it appears as though UEFA might finally draw a line in the sand with, I'd say, their strongest public attack on FIFA in the organization's modern history, declaring this crosses a line that football's governing institutions should never cross. UEFA takes it extremely seriously, so should every stakeholder, league, clubs, players, supporters, governments, and everyone who cares about the future of the game. The soul and governance of football are not assets to trade, especially with zero transparency as to who gains financially. None of us are the owners of football. It is not FIFA's to sell. Okay, UEFA, you might actually have a spine after all. And according to Sky News, several UEFA nations are even considering boycotting the World Cup if this plan isn't stopped. And as drastic as that sounds, that is probably going to be the only way this ceases to come to fruition, because remember, Infantino's FIFA were also pushing to stage the World Cup every 2 years recently. UEFA threatened to boycott and the proposal was shelved. We also saw England's new Prime Minister give his 2 cents, condemning the concept, saying the World Cup is not a product, it is the greatest competition in world sport and it was never anyone's to sell. Dress the deal up however you like. Once you have sold a piece of it, you have sold out. So the fact that this is extending beyond sporting bodies and causing mainstream political discourse is significant, because yeah, this is truly dark stuff, but ultimately actions speak louder than words. Like, if UEFA doesn't act, it's over, because this is the Infantino playbook. Largely ignore the criticism, consolidate more power, make more money, repeat. Every controversy has only emboldened him to want even more riches. I said at the beginning, this man is a parasite that will stop at nothing. So we ought to treat his latest fraudulent scheme with the same universal disdain that we did with the European Super League. Enough is enough. Infantino and his cronies are a cancer on football. Switching gears to international football news now, and the Azzurri are back in the headlines as they appear to have finally landed on a permanent leadership structure, with Roberto Mancini returning as head coach and Claudio Ranieri taking over as sporting director. Now, if you've been tuning into the coverage for the past 2 days, you'll be acutely aware of the bizarre situation taking place within Italy's Football Federation. But for those who may may have missed the news, basically post-World Cup failure, wholesale changes were made, a new president arrived, Paolo Maldini was appointed technical director, and Leonardo was brought in as the senior advisor to oversee the national team's reset. They went big in search of a coach, going for Ancelotti first before chasing Pep Guardiola. Having failed to land both, they settled on plan C, Andrea Pirlo. Pirlo's proposed appointment, though, then became engulfed in controversy surrounding his commercial relationship with Russian bookmaker Fonbet. The backlash became so significant that the Italian FA ultimately refused to approve the appointment, a decision that infuriated Maldini and Leonardo. They both then immediately resigned in protest just 16 days into the role, leaving the federation scrambling with even more positions to fill now. But I guess credit where credit's due here, because the FIGC has since filled these newly vacant roles within 24 hours as Roberto Mancini returns to the national team only 3 years after walking away from the role. His departure for Saudi Arabia left many supporters furious back in 2023, but it's difficult to ignore what he achieved during his first spell. He rebuilt Italy after the disastrous 2018 World Cup qualifying failure, guiding them to the Euro 2020 title. He also oversaw a world record 37-match unbeaten run, all whilst playing a fairly decent brand of possession-based football. That being said, his previous tenure wasn't all great. Mancini also failed to qualify Italy for the 2022 World Cup before resigning, so this is hardly a flawless appointment. But unlike Pirlo, at least Mancini has some serious credentials from both club and country in the past. I mean, he's certainly an upgrade on Gattuso. I think we can all agree on that at least. I guess the rationale here from the FIGC is that Italy simply could not afford another failed experiment. Mancini already understands the national team environment. He knows many of the players and has previously demonstrated a base level of competence on the pitch too. Alongside him arrives Claudio Ranieri, whose role is kind of hard to gauge. Rather than coaching day-to-day, Ranieri will oversee the broader technical direction of Italian football, from player development and long-term planning for all the various levels of the Azzurri. To be honest, I was keen to see Maldini operate in this role, but Ranieri is also a highly respected and accomplished figure in Italian football. From Leicester's impossible Premier League triumph to decades managing across Europe, Ranieri has built a reputation as perhaps football's ultimate stabilizer, a calm figure that can hopefully bring the political chaos of Italian football down a notch. I don't think this pair is exactly a footballing revolution, but considering the state of the national team right now and the fact that they've become a bit of a laughing stock on and off the pitch, these appointments are much needed damage control. You know, it's not a Pep Maldini crazy rebuild, but it could be worse too. Hopefully we're done reporting on Italy for a week or two, because honestly, I'm getting bored of the drama. Staying in international football news though, and one of the most anticipated managerial appointments in modern history has finally become reality, with Zinedine Zidane officially beginning his reign as France head coach. It is a succession that has felt inevitable for years now. Didier Deschamps announced last year that the 2026 World Cup would be his final tournament in charge, bringing an end to a remarkable 14-year spell that delivered the 2018 World Cup. He also guided them to the 2022 World Cup final and consistent deep runs at major tournaments. France ultimately exited this year's World Cup in disappointing fashion, finishing 4th. So now the baton passes to arguably the only man capable of following him. Zidane has signed a 4-year contract through to the 2030 World Cup after reportedly rejecting every club approaching him since leaving Real Madrid in 2021. At his unveiling, he even admitted, "The France job was the only one I wanted. I've had offers over these 4 or 5 years to take charge of a club, and I turned them all down for the French national team." Perhaps the most intriguing quote from his presser was in regards to how his France side will actually play, and while refusing to reveal too much, Zidane hinted at a more expansive philosophy, saying, "I was a number 10. What drives me is scoring goals. There has to be balance, but you'll discover the style soon enough." That should excite supporters, right? Deschamps built the majority of his success on tactical structure, a tendency to be pragmatic at times, whereas Zidane's Real Madrid teams thrived on technical freedom and attacking quality. And with Mbappe, Dembele, Elise, Doué, Barcola, Cherki, and other technical gems amongst their ranks, many expect France to evolve even further into a more expressive side without sacrificing the winning mentality that has defined this group for the past decade. In fairness to Deschamps here, I actually thought France were very entertaining in this year's World Cup, but under Zidane, it's an exciting proposition nonetheless. And to close out today's ep, we head over to England now. And seriously, what is going on with Marcus Rashford, man. Just a few months ago, it appeared the situation had pretty much solved itself, having enjoyed an excellent loan spell at Barcelona, contributing 14 goals and 14 assists as the Catalan Giants won La Liga. United had inserted a relatively modest £26 million buyout clause too, so the expectation was that Barca would inevitably activate it. Instead, they then pivoted towards another Englishman, Anthony Gordon, alongside Dortmund's Adeyemi, leaving Rashford back at Old Trafford and effectively forcing both player and club back to square one. The World Cup was then viewed as Rashford's opportunity to put his name out there, but things didn't unfold as planned. Sure, he did score in England's opening win over Croatia, but then struggled to cement his place in Tuchel's side. Ironically, Gordon eventually solidified his starting role on the left wing for the knockout stages, so the interest for Rashford has somewhat fizzled out since. It doesn't help that his wages are enormous. Rashford reportedly earns around £325,000 per week, making him one of United's highest paid players. Very few clubs are willing to match those wages, while United themselves are desperate to remove that salary from the books. According to reports, Rashford's remaining contract would cost United around £39 million before bonuses if he stayed through to its expiry, giving the club every incentive to try and get rid. However, Michael Carrick's appointment as manager may, I guess, complicate things slightly. Unlike Amorim, who had completely frozen Rashford out, Carrick has publicly suggested every player deserves an opportunity if they remain at the club. Rashford is expected to rejoin preseason training, and there appears to be genuine willingness on both sides to see whether the relationship can be repaired. Rashford has also reportedly rejected lucrative offers from less appealing destinations because he wants to remain at the highest level possible, but Europe's elite clubs appear reluctant to meet both United's valuation and Rashford's wage demands. That leaves what may be the only other realistic compromise if he doesn't stay, which is to go on another loan. If another club agrees to absorb most of his salary, perhaps with United subsidizing part of the deal like with Barcelona, it would temporarily solve the problem for everyone involved. But yeah, long story short, this just feels like another Sancho situation. He's still on the books till 2028, so just a total mess of a contract. Anyways, guys, that's all for today's DMAC Daily. Thanks as always for tuning in, and I'll see you tomorrow.